Just on that topic of cropping and stuff, how do you know that that's not going to tangibly or intangibly change the landscape?
Oh, exactly.
Well, it's even tearing down an old tree, right, which could be a problem. That, let's say it falls near a shed or a barn or even a house, and that tree needs to come down. To get down to the root systems, you might need to go further than half a metre.
Guarantee you do. Hey, Derek, welcome back, mate. We have missed you. There was a little song playing for you.
I did hear it.
Oh, okay.
I did hear the spillover because your headphones are quite loud.
There you go. Hey, mate, great to have you back here for the Greater Wealth. You've been missed because, quite frankly, I've had to do these shows with the shaved monkey, okay? And, we have had some special guest stars, and I appreciate that. And stars they were. Derek was, oh, my word. Warren, thank you.
Mr. Black himself from GWC.
Absolutely. An absolute star himself, but it's just not the same without you. So welcome back to the couch, and thank you for saving me from the...
Shaved monkey.
No, just the embarrassment of the lack of professionalism I have to deal with.
So I'm not jumping into this one just because the people on social media will see this one. So I said, Aaron, I want to try something. Give me a 30-second countdown. He's like, yeah, no worries. And then come straight to air.
Oh, okay, there you go. Sorry.
So,
clearly I wasn't listening.
Mr. Professional.
Well, what I do, you see, as I say, what I do is I build walls, okay, invisible walls. Think about the last few years. We've had the perspex up, right? And with you, there's just perspex, okay? Simple as that, mate. Great to see you. I'm just joking, Mr. Cartier, Mr. Shade Monkey himself. Welcome.
You're lucky I'm
world.
trying to be professional here.
All right. Well,
keyword's trying.
Okay, well, you've got an hour to put it together, so let's give it a crack. Derek, mate, you've got some really interesting stuff to talk about on the old show.
There's a lot been going on. Of course, when we were away, Mr. McGowan called it a day.
Oh, you noticed? Okay.
I actually had time to actually see that, and wasn't it fascinating? I thought it was very interesting, the similarities how he quit, like Jacinda Ardern. Quit. No. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I thought to myself, this is suspicious because...
Do you think?
Yeah. I thought to myself, this is really, really suspicious. And I'll tell you why. I was reading an article by a guy called Brian Lowe, who does an article called an email called The Daily Reckoning. And I thought it was very well put how he did this. He said, there are similarities between them and Jacinda Ardern's quitting. He said the problem is that when you have a heavy-handed... You look historically on dictators.
Sure.
He says, historically what they do, when they are heavy-handed in legislation, they create enemies.
Yes.
Okay. And the problem when you create enemies is then you have to double down and be even more ruling in the further legislation you go to keep your enemies at bay.
No doubt.
And he says there's one thing in Chinese culture which they talk about is the fact that you've got the tiger that riding the tiger, and you don't want to get off the tiger when it's in full force and in full run. And he said just the way that he quit was very, very, very unusual. And I tend to agree. If you actually look at the footage of what occurred there, as opposed to the audio bits and the video bits that the mainstream media took on board, he looked scared, he looked shaken. There was a quiver in his voice, and I thought to myself, somebody's got to him. That was just my thought. That was my initial reaction. I thought this is very, very interesting.
I've noticed a quiver has been appearing over the last, quite a period of time, actually. I have noticed quite a lot of fear in him. And I think as a leader, he really showed that, lack of leadership, quite frankly, because he did seem to be running the ship with a bit of a shake in the old hand.
While that was going on, and this leads into the next story, is that there's been legislation that's come out the Labor Party have been doing in the state of Western Australia that most people are not aware of. And today we want to highlight what that is. Travis, you're across the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act of 2021 in many, many ways. Do you want to, in a brief summary, kind of look at what's been going on and explain to people, what's been kind of pushed under the door?
I want to just quickly clarify something on that one first. We've got a guest on the things as well. We're about to introduce her. I don't think anyone is totally across this because it's actually a very, very large lot of legislation. But there's been a whole lot of new terminology that they've introduced into this legislation. Because originally it was a rehash of the 1974 legislation. The claim is, and this is actually coming from Kimmy Suckling, who was the assistant manager of the Department of Planning, Heritage and whatever. So she actually came up on my Facebook page when I put a post about it and tried to defend this legislation, saying it's just a rehash. And it is a rehash.
Sure.
But when you do a rehash, you don't add whole entire sections to legislation. The
That's
problem
right.
is to try and work out what those extras have been. They've got all these guidelines and acts and principles and everything that they've got to run through. And those things are insane. So it's not just the legislation that you've got to read, it's the actual act itself. And then on top of those acts, you've got to look up like directories of who you can talk to, guides and regulations, when they can be charged, fee schedules. And there's so much to this act. It's not just the act, it's everything that's associated with it as well, which is extremely problematic. Now, the bit that makes this really problematic is the way it interacts with other federal and state legislation as well. So it's not just one act, it's a whole network of different acts working together to pretty much, and sorry to anyone who's got delicate ears, this is seriously going to screw farmers, miners, everyday people in the city. This is going to affect everyone from city slickers in the city all the way to country people as well.
Absolutely.
This does not affect anyone, and I'll get into that one in a minute. But I think there's someone we need to talk to as well.
Before we do, how is it going to? What's the essence of it?
Yeah. So there's two parts of it. There's also how deep you go down. So let's say you got to dig a hole. You want to put a fence in. So you got to dig a hole. Let's say the hole's 80 centimetres. Anything past 50 centimetres deep, that's 50.
50 centimetres.
Yeah, 50 centimetres.
Millimetres.
So we need to get a permit from the local Aboriginal authority people. On top of that, if you, let's say it's a square meterage, so there's a couple of figures that are quoted in there. One's 100 square meters, one's 10 square meters. I think it depends on how you're doing it, whether and what area you're in.
Cool.
So anything, I'm using the figure of 100 square meters. If you're digging up anything that's over 100 square meters, like let's say you're clearing a fire break, you're doing some harvesting of your wheat, whatever, you've also got to get a permit as well. Now, the things they're not talking, they haven't explained yet, is if you're planting and then harvesting at the same time, is that one permit? Is it 3 permits? Is it 10 permits? What activities, or can you just get a single permit for your entire block, your entire property, your entire development, entire community? None of these details have actually come out.
Oh, it sounds a lot like The Voice, you know? Okay, there's all this talk, but no actual detail.
The biggest difference is they're doing these workshops to try and explain it, and people still don't understand it even after the workshops.
Okay.
So I am actually going to the one in Northam on the 28th of this month. So I managed to get in before they shut down the ticket sales for that one.
Good.
So that's going to be interesting whether they actually let me in or not. And then we're going to be doing another event on the 5th, but we'll talk to our guests about that one because they know more about it. So I think it's time we bring Bernie and Christine in. So Bernie and Christine are actually farmers who this is going to be directly affecting.
So glad to actually speak to them, though, because this is about affecting one of the most important thing here, the pastoral part of Western Australia. Exactly, our food cycle.
Come on, you love your food.
I do. Okay, Christine, Bernie, saved my life. Come on. So we've got them on the line there. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello, how are you going?
Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So you do have myself, Christine. We've got Derek on the show as well as Aaron as well. Can you hear all of us as well?
It's very faint. We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, is that any better at all?
It is a little.
Yeah, well, okay. Sorry, that's unfortunately what we've got, but we'll give it a go.
Okay.
Thanks for being part of the show. Look, can you I won't ask the question myself. I'll throw over to you, mate.
Oh, you're
Travis?
dumping everything
I
on me
really will
today.
on you on this one because, look, this is such a serious issue and I want to cover it properly.
So my first question to you, Christine, from everything you've heard and read yourself, especially you and Bernie, what is your biggest concern in regards to this new legislation?
That the red tape will take too long to be able to do what we need to do as far as, say, seeding and things like that. By the time we put an application and knowing government laws and things, it'll be harvest time before we get the permit to put the seeding in.
So
that's Bernie's version. Mine's quite different, really. I mean, it's all tied in together. But the whole thing is unworkable, absolutely unworkable. And so I feel as if this state is going to grind to a halt because it affects so many people on so many different levels. Like farmers won't be able to run their businesses as normal. As Bernie said, if you don't get even if you apply and you you might not get your permit for weeks.
Right.
What if you've got to put your crop in? What if you have to attend to something? Say, for instance, your fence blows down and your stock are getting out and you have to rejig your fences, but you can't do that without a permit.
Well, I
And
didn't
your
even
stock,
think of
what do you do with your stock, for
That's
instance?
right. That's
know?
right. And so much of farming is time critical, right?
Absolutely. Say you had a fire and the fence is burnt down. Then what?
Yeah.
Can you put your fences back up? The legislation, from what I've been reading, is very vague, and so another part of it that really I find really troubling is that it talks about somebody coming to assess your property for whether you have to have a permit for this or that or the other thing, but there's no. It's so vague. One of the things, it talks about Aboriginal artefacts and those sort of things, but one of the things that they've introduced, I did hear Travis talking about the 1974 regulation, and I don't believe that this was in it. It's talking about cultural landscapes,
I can
tangible
confirm it's
or
not.
intangible.
Yep.
How can anyone define an intangible cultural landscape?
Absolutely.
And I've actually gone through the 74 legislation and compared it to the current one.
Yep.
The landscape does not appear anywhere in the 1974 Act, and neither does knowledge holder, the term knowledge holder. That's
Wow.
a new title that they've created for a bureaucrat.
Right.
So
Okay.
there's a really interesting point that Christine raised on that one, because especially, first of all, there's a lot of time critical things. I know with wheat, if you leave your seeds in the soil for too long, mold, weevils, bacteria and all that sort of stuff can really damage the crop as well. So on top of that, the biggest problem is you need to know what your expenses are. So especially on the finance side of things, because a lot of farmers run their farms off overdrafts.
Sure.
The problem is if they do need to have someone to come over to determine whether a farm or whatever is a site. If you've got a farm that's 10,000 hectares in size, like that's a big farm.
Absolutely.
One person cannot check the entire site. There's just no physical way for them to do that. So in the legislation, there's all these additional costs and charges and fee schedules in there. So
Sure.
it ranges from $80 an hour for the normal shit kicker person on the phone sort of thing to a Aboriginal expert is up to $300 an hour. And then on top of that, if they have to get lawyers, professionals, archaeologists and all that sort of stuff in, then all their charges as well will, from what I'm reading, will get then charged into the cost of this permit as well.
Completely untenable. Absolutely. Yeah.
The
Now,
problem is-
okay, from a financial point of view, we'll bring our finance guy in. Okay,
Yeah.
on this. Look, Derek, what are the implications here from that point of view?
Well, a couple. My biggest concern is going to discourage productivity, and that's really shocking. I mean, I see it as a real. When you attack the land, all wealth comes from the land.
Sure.
All right, gold, silver, precious metals. Your crops, even your materials to build a building and housing and that sort of stuff. Everything comes from the dirt. So this is a direct attack at the dirt, and a direct attack against people being able to produce things, particularly in Australia, like how Stephen Pettiff highlighted, and he's absolutely right in the fact that Australia is built on the farmers and also on mining, and those two industries will be directly affected by this legislation, which has not been thought through. Because if you make it more difficult for people to produce, what do people do? See you later. I'm out of here. Goodbye. The roll-on effect, and that concerns me is not. Never mind how this is going to affect food production in Australia, how you eat in the city slicker, but also in terms of how they're going to produce an income from in the mining industry, through to the reduced taxation that now the government will have because people are going, we're not going to produce as much. We can't do this. Now, they may recoup some of this and trying to get permits, but this applying for permits and red tape, farmers don't want to do paperwork. They want to get out there with their hands and put a crop in and or produce agriculture. That's what they want to do. They don't want to have to be secretaries, and I think that's the biggest concern I see in this.
Well, yeah, you're dragging someone away from their area of expertise to put them there, playing paperwork. Ridiculous. When exactly right. If you want to be productive, you put people in the roles that they're good at. And if you're a farmer, yes, on the land, that's where you need to be. So you are breaking down productivity.
Okay. So one question I want to throw to Christine and Bernie is, now with the limited ability that you guys have had to actually read this legislation and try and dig your way through it, what is the biggest thing that needs, like, is this workable in any form as a farmer, or is there something that can be modified in this to still protect Aboriginal heritage but also allow farmers and miners to do what they need to do?
In my opinion, it has to be scrapped because there's so many levels and so many reasons. There's a few things. I might just bring up a few of them if you're interested.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
There's you're talking about people who have to come out and inspect your property. How do we know that those people are qualified to do that? As far as I'm concerned, there's nobody alive who actually knows.
Well, yeah, this is the important thing about asking the questions, right? I mean, currently we're running in a one-party state here in Western Australia. Everything just gets pushed through. This was pushed through right in, in between lockdowns and all sorts of things in 2021. This hasn't been, that consultation has not been used, especially with the people it's actually going to affect. And yes, that is definitely farmers. Well, that is everybody, let's face it, but predominantly farmers and those in the mining industry.
Well, I think they're going to be actually looking at it from an Aboriginal heritage perspective as opposed to a farming perspective.
Spot on.
And I think
Spot
that's the problem with that is you have people in
Can I just interrupt you? If there were sacred sites that have been identified, I think the average person would be quite okay with that. There's obviously some sites around the country which are, obviously respected and that sort of thing, and nobody has a problem with that. Well, I wouldn't think that people would have a problem with that. But Travis tells me that earlier on, the whole of the area from Geraldton to Southern Cross and to Esperance has been classified as Noongar country. And according to the legislation, that automatically means that you go into Tier 2, which makes a whole range of things have to happen. But all of that land doesn't necessarily have Aboriginal sites on it. For instance, Bernie's family have owned the property, some of the property, since 1905, and I had lots of very close conversations with his mother over the years, and she was born in 1900, and so she's lived on the property since 1940 or something, and she knew everything about everything and who was who and everything about the whole district. She could tell you everything. And never once did she mention anything about Aboriginal sites or people coming out to look at the sites or anything. So in the whole of that time, nobody's been ever interested in our property. So why now? Why now?
Ooh,
I don't believe that there's anyone alive who actually really honestly would know, and I don't know how you can justify somebody appointing somebody who's not qualified. So how can they be qualified?
So just for the people listening at home who probably don't understand this one, it was a couple of years ago, there was a native title settlement in WA. So it was all Noongar land. So everything Geraldton down to, I think it was Esperance. It was $750 million got paid out to the local Noongar tribe. So to put that into perspective, there's 30,000 Noongars in WA. That's the census figures. So it works out about $120,000 per family.
Wow.
So this is on top of everything else they get, like the mining royalties and all that sort of stuff. So what's happened is because of this native title claim, the Noongar people in WA have a documented, legislated claim on everything in WA. All of this land is theirs.
I am so sick of this.
So,
the fact is, this is one country full of so many fantastic people, right? And I'm sick of playing this game of Bagsies. We were here first, therefore we own it. We're not playing shotgun in the car here, okay? This country has so much to offer and so much to offer so many people. We've got to stop this absolute discrimination, because this is what it is, okay? It's discrimination. That's what it is.
That's all it is. So, and it's taking discrimination to a whole nother level, because if the problem is they don't even say Aboriginal elders or anything like this to do the inspections, they say Aboriginal experts. So if you got someone who identifies as an Aboriginal expert, they're going to be getting paid up to $300 an hour to walk around on your property.
Incredible.
Like there's so much bullshit to go onto this. It's insane. So
not to mention the costs of travel to your property as well for those in the farming. So you're talking about air flights, potentially travel, cars, accommodation, overnight stay and meals.
Like, there's so many things in this. So one of the things that we're trying to organise is on the 5th of this next month. We'll be at the Christine. Can you confirm the name of the hall?
It's the 3rd of July.
3rd of July. I keep saying the 5th.
At the Peaceful Hall, PIESSEVILLE. It's a little hall, local hall between Wagen and Narrogin.
Yep. So, and for the people who are listening, the buzzing is because Christine's on the farm. The mobile coverage is terrible, and so we're just amazed that she's been able to stick in as long as she has.
Today we've been discussing the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act 2021, and it's come out to light that if you dig deeper than 50 millimetres on your property, you might be in breach of this act that the West Australian government is trying to pass or has passed, and comes into effect from the 1st of July. Huge implications not only for the mining industry, but of course the backbone of our nation, the farmers, Bernie and Christine Evans, who are farmers on the land, have been for all their lives, as far as I'm aware. We've been discussing the implications for this. Guys, I want to, first of all, thank you for joining us today. And what effect will this have on farming in WA?
Oh, it'll be huge. I just wanted to just correct you there on one thing to get it correct, Derek. The depth that you can dig to is 50 centimetres.
50 centimetres, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I've already said 50 millimetres.
I did say millimetres. Thanks for that correction. I mean, so the half a metre, basically.
Yeah.
Yes, so in other words, if you want to put a fence post or do deep ripping for your crops or anything like that, that would be necessary.
Your long drop toilets.
Just on that topic of cropping and stuff, how do you know that that's not going to tangibly or intangibly change the landscape?
Oh, exactly.
Well, it's even tearing down an old tree, right? Which could be a problem. You know, let's say it falls near a shed or a barn or even a house, and you know that tree needs to come down. To get down to the root systems, you might need to go further than half a metre.
Guarantee you do.
Yeah.
The other thing as well, it's not just the digging down into the soil, it's also changing. This is where the landscape one gets really interesting. If you're changing the landscape over a certain meterage, so I did see a comment there from AW71 saying 5 metres by 5 metres, which is 25 square metres. So if, for example, harvesting a crop, you're not digging into the ground, but you are still pruning the tops of the plants, you're changing the landscape. So if there's a tree that needs to come down because it's near power lines or it's a danger, or you're clearing out a fire break, if you're doing more than 25 square metres, you need a permit.
So back to the question, Christine, how do you think this is going to have effect on farming in WA?
Well, as I said to you, I don't think it's sustainable or workable or any of those things. And I think it's putting a lot of fear into people, really. My understanding of that, the fines of not doing this are huge, and it's larger for business than it is for single people or ordinary people. But all farmers are business people.
That's right.
So that increases their the ability for whoever to fine them to a much greater degree. And there's no farms that will be able to sustain those fines because, you know, people think farmers are rich and maybe they've got a lot of assets, but most farmers are working on overdraft.
That's right.
You know, so a lot of them are close to the wire. If they have a good year, well, they can bring that back, and if they have a bad year, they're further down under the wire, so to speak, you know. And so it's a really worrying time for them. And the other thing that people don't think about is that all the businesses that farmers support, all the local towns, the service providers, the machinery providers, the fuel providers, the schools and teachers and banks. The banks are closing everywhere now anyway.
You're a very important link in the chain here. Hugely.
Pardon?
You're a very important link in the chain here.
Absolutely. And so I think that eventually, if this goes through, there's a possibility of people starving in Western Australia. That's how bad I think it is.
Yeah.
So it goes further than that as well, because you got to remember, a lot of our grain and food we also export.
Yes.
So there's also the export incomes as well. So it's not, let's say, because of the fines, the farmers start putting in smaller crops.
Mm-hmm.
So our export amounts are going to be reduced. What's on the shelves are going to be reduced. We already have enough pressures on families as it is. So when there's a supply and demand issues, like we saw with the cyclone that went through Carnarvon and wiped out the banana crops, all of a sudden bananas went from $1.99 a kilo to $27 a kilo. Yep. So if there's a supply issue on food into WA and the rest of Australia and internationally, what's that going to do to inflation across Australia already? People are
course.
already struggling. So the flow-on effect. So I consider farming and mining to be the foundations of the Australian economy. Everything else is built around that in one way or another. So I truly don't believe Labor has thought anything about this.
Let's talk about the flow-on effect at the moment. Christine, are you concerned this can go ahead in Western Australia? There are also implications for it happening in the other parts of Australia.
Oh, absolutely. My understanding that Anna in Queensland is looking at it, and if this goes through, when I say comfortably, but it does go through and it is implemented, she's looking at introducing that in Queensland.
Yeah, there is actually currently a petition going around about that because, yes, they have drafted the legislation apparently in Queensland. I don't know if it's actually been before the Parliament yet, but it has been drafted. And that, as I say, there is something we can do as far as the, objecting to that. And, I think that where I'm going to go on this is, okay, if we've got this in Western Australia already, we're going to, if we go through with this carry on with the voice, if Australia does say yes, the added complication, this is just going to literally bankrupt farmers right across this nation. Rather.
What's your deep long-term concern about this, Christine? Is it, like Aaron's highlighted here, bankruptcy and that other corporations internationally come in, buy up the Australian farms and take them over? We've seen certain nations do that to our land here in Australia. What are your long-term concerns about this?
I think it's a possibility. Are they going to have to abide by the rules as well, or do? My understanding is that overseas investors don't have to abide by as many rules, but I don't understand enough about that to make a comment on it, really.
I can help with that one.
I do know that there are a lot of people from overseas, Europe, Germany, and China, for instance, are buying up Australian land.
No doubt.
So what happens with things like that? The organisation answers into what's called a state agreement. So they negotiate a deal with whatever company is buying whatever. The same sort of thing as the Mineralogy Act that the WA state government had with Clive Palmer. Mm-hmm. They enter into negotiations. So everything from tax rates to permits, costs, expenses, what the government's going to do versus what they're going to do, everything is negotiable. Everything's on the table. So if there is a large company that wants to buy off these lands, part of the condition of the sale with the state agreement could be that they do not have to apply for these permits.
Right.
So that is a very plausible.
So where's the level playing field here?
There isn't one. That's the biggest thing across the board in all aspects, whether it's financial investments.
But hang on. It's called a fair trade agreement. The word fair's in it. I mean, come on.
Let's ask this. And Christine, I don't know you and Bernie are the ones that are qualified to ask this question, but I want to ask it anyway. What do you think is the government's motivation for passing such an act?
Well, it's really there's two schools of thought. Some people just think it's totally irresponsible and they don't know what they're doing. But I think there's a deeper thing behind this, and it's really hard to explain what it is. But when people want to take over people and control them, or what they do is they starve them.
It's really funny because Josh McCurry has also just written, almost like the elite want us hungry and scared.
Yes.
So continue that, Christine. You were about to launch into a second thought there. What was it? So when people are hungry, and what was the other part?
Just go back a step. It's really hard to hear. So what was the original question?
So the question is, my original question was this: what do you think it was that is motivating the government to do such a legislation? What do you think is behind that? And you said there were two schools of thoughts. Some thought they haven't thought it through. Some people think that they haven't thought that. And you were going on about you were mentioning there's something deeper than that.
Yeah, well, that's my two things. I think it's been a long time in the planning, and the reality is that they slipped it through in 2021, calling it emergency legislation. How can it be emergency legislation, really? Okay. There's no consultation with people. People didn't know what was going on because everyone was concerned about COVID and being locked up and wearing masks and all that stuff. And so they brought this in. Why would you bring something in unless you had some sort of agenda?
I agree. I think this is deeply agenda driven. Yeah.
And what do you think
There
that
is
is,
an
that
agenda.
agenda? What do you
Yeah.
think the agenda is, Christine?
It's like taking over control of our country. Maybe it's part of taking over control of the world. Australian people are very, what's the word? Bernie says laid back, but I don't think they take being bossed around. I suppose it's our convict heritage, really, being told what to do fairly easily. It's been fairly obvious recently that people have been doing what they've been told to do.
I've always said that the Australians' apathy is the greatest thing about being Australian, but it's also the worst thing about Australians. That whole layback thing that Bernie said, it has brought us undone. Certainly over the last 3 years, it has, no doubt.
So what tangible actions can people do about this, Christine and Bernie?
I think that in the past, farmers have never been united. I feel quite emotional about this, but it's time for people to get together and be united. It's really an opportunity, I think, to be united. Forget your differences. There's different organisations, but it's time for people to forget petty differences, philosophies, this, that and the other thing, and be united against a tyranny, really, because it is tyranny.
Absolutely.
And so therefore if people come together and truly come to some sort of arrangement that can work, and this is the things that we need to discuss at our meeting. I think it'll be just a foundational meeting, really, that we hope will spread across the country, to actually take steps to do something about it. And Travis has spoken to us about the way we can do it politically, and I think that's a way to do it, definitely a way to do it, because to change the parliament, and it seems like an impossible project, but in actual fact, nothing's impossible.
No, and I don't think actually, to be honest with you, I don't think that's a massive change either.
What support do the country folk need from the city folk?
I think it's education and understanding what it all means. I think most city folk probably don't even know that it's happening. And I guess we're in the process of doing that by having this radio conversation. But I think maybe, I don't know, what do you have? Do you know what the question was? No. What support do you think country folk need from city folk?
Probably political support.
Political support, Bernie says.
Yeah.
Political in the sense of learning how to vote, to create a situation where the upper house can block legislation until this is turned around, because it's an act of parliament which can be turned around.
Of course it is.
And it's different from the voice, because the voice, if that ever comes into fruition, it'll be really, really difficult to ever change that. But an act of parliament can be repealed. So in the meantime, if farmers take steps to reduce their production and that sort of thing, I guess it's understanding from city people what they're trying to achieve. Because because there's no doubt the prices will go up one way or the other. If we do nothing, the prices will go up for food.
No doubt.
And if we do something, it will in the short term.
At least it's controllable at that stage. So what Christine is talking about is effectively for people working in the city with an everyday job, it's a thing called a go slow.
Yeah, sure.
So let's say your boss has been a bit of a twat. So instead of doing the extra work and making sure you do a good job, you work to the letter of your contract. Okay. You annoy the boss, your productivity goes down, and that forces them to the negotiation table.
Sure.
because the foundations of the Australian economy, and I'm not just talking for mining, farming here, I'm also talking for mining as well.
Okay.
If we do an intentional go slow, so instead of, let's say you use, say, 10 ton worth of seeds, put 9 ton of seeds out instead. So you still got a crop, you're still harvesting, you're still working, you still got money coming in, so you can still meet your financial obligations, but you're not producing as much.
Okay.
So what's happening is you're pulling supply from the market, which forces prices up, and you tell people straight up, we are doing this intentionally to send a message to the government. You don't repeal this act, we are going to keep removing food from our produce until you come to the negotiation table. Unless you've got representation actually on the floor of Parliament, there's nothing you can do. Talking to the representation side of things, it annoys the absolute bejesus out of me, because we've just gone through 3 years of arguably the most spineless Liberal government we've ever had, or opposition we've ever had, and it's only now that the Liberal parties are finding their voice. It's only now that they're starting to stand up for things. Where were they 3 years ago when this legislation was being tabled in Parliament? Why are now that it's already changed that they're starting to bark? So it's too late. The ship's already sailed. So the other thing that I've organised, and this is in conjunction with Global Wealth Club, which is really amazing. Global Wealth Club have agreed to do a series of free webinars for farmers who... So the background behind Warren is asset protection. So he's arguably one of the best asset protectors in Australia. So he's actually going to be coming out to do some presentations out in the wheat belt and surrounding areas to actually teach farmers what's going to happen if they stop producing, what can the banks do, what can the local council do, so that way they can arm themselves with as much knowledge as possible in the lead up to this. So if the permit does hit the fan, if they do start copping fines, if this happens, how to deal with it, what to expect and stuff like that, so they're not blindsided by this. Because I think the biggest source of fear in a lot of the farmers at the moment, they don't know.
Exactly.
Knowledge. They're totally blind at this stage. So, and I'm amazed with Christine and Bernie. So thank you very much for coming on to the show today for us.
Thank you, guys.
You can hear it in Christine's voice. It's taken a lot for her to be on here today, and hit after hit after hit for the last couple of decades with our farmers. And I think it's time us city people, because I'll openly admit I'm from a farming background. My family has a station over in Leighton, New South Wales. My mum used to have a truffle farm down in Denmark. Like, I've been around farming, I know what it's like, but I'm a city slicker. You ask me to drive a tractor, I'm not very good. I'll probably flip it. So, but it's about time us city people actually started understanding that all the luxuries we have is because like people like Bernie and Christine and their hard work.
For so many years, we used to say Australia rides on the sheep's back. That being a big part of it, meaning our agriculture was the foundation of this country. Why have we forgotten that? Oh, because of mining? Come on. The reality is, farmers are not. It's not a job. Okay, it's a calling. It's a way of life. It's actually someone who cares for the land and nurtures the land and creates something that we all benefit from. And I think people need to stop thinking of the farmers as like an us and them when you're talking about city folk and country folk. We're Australians, simple as that, and we should all be pulling in the same direction.
Yep. But the one thing to remember that this wasn't caused by the farmers. This is them just trying to survive.
Absolutely.
So whatever happens, if you start seeing the prices going up and the government starts having stabs at the farmers saying, oh, this is because of the farmers or this is that reason. No. This is their mismanagement. This is all because the government has failed. And I'm talking generations of Liberal. So we need to start standing up as Australians as a whole and stop voting these bastards in. They've had their chance, they've failed. It's time we stop voting for them.
A big thanks to our guests online as well, for Christine and Bernie, which I'm not sure if you're still there. If you are there, thank you very much. Are you there?
Yes, we are here.
Lovely, cool. Well, you just don't know when it comes to the old Telstra lines, do you? You're there, you're gone. Playing Russian roulette with the old telephone lines here. I'll throw over to Travis. Travis, let's finish the show.
So the one thing I wanted to really highlight is jump onto the government website. There are a few of these workshops left over. So if you are a farmer, please ensure you get to one of them. The closest to Perth is the northern one. That's actually booked out. There's heaps. There's a heap right up north, like Karratha, Kununurra and all that sort of stuff. They're all booked out. All the ones south of the Carnarvon are all booked out as well. So if you are close to one and it's open, please get there anyway. Just listen. You need to know these things because this is going to determine your future as a farmer. On top of that, we do have the event in Wagen. So Christine, I'll just confirm, was that a Wednesday or a Monday? Because I thought it was the Wednesday.
It's Monday the 3rd of July at 10 a.m.
There we go. It's Monday, 3rd of July. So,
Glad someone's onto it.
Aaron, I won't be in on Monday. So I'm sorry, but having the comedic relief on the Monday is second to this. So I'll
It's not comedic, trust me.
Oh, thanks, Aaron.
We have other words.
So I will be committing to be at Wagen for that event.
Awesome. Really important, mate. And I tell you what, we'd rather you were there. And all jokes aside, it's far too important. Yeah.
Yep. Now, Christine, just to confirm, 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yes,
Yeah, so 10 o'clock at the
Peaceful Hall. It's between Wagen and Errigan.
Yep. And so we will be creating a event for that one. So I'm
Great.
not even going to tell Aaron this. I'm just going to chuck it up on the website, chuck it in the comment sections and the social medias. So if you are in the local area and you are a farmer, I personally, not just as a radio show host, but also the other stuff that I do, I'm not wearing my hat today, so you won't see it. So I do want to get up there to talk to farmers, find out what's going on, and effectively I want to be down in the what do they call it? Down in the trenches with them as well, because this is
In the dirt.
in the dirt.
Literally, in the dirt.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's,
Even further than 50 centimetres.
you know,
I bury him up to his neck in this because this is absolutely ridiculous. And I think we should all carry shovels. I really do.
I'm
Pitchforks and torches.
Your shovel is going to be your symbol, guys, of liberty here.
Absolutely.
No. We need pitchforks and torches, and on the steps of Parliament. Can you imagine, like, just dressed up as hillbillies, getting up on the streets of Parliament and just dumping a heap of potatoes?
Can we just
or
keep
something on
away from the
steps?
sickles, please? All right, with that.
Sickles and hammers?
If people want to know more information, how can they get it?
Message me on Stalkbook.
Okay,
Facebook
fantastic.
is probably the easiest, or you can reach me on the phone number. You know what? I'm going to dox myself here. So 0404 312 427 is my direct personal phone number. So, yeah. Don't call me before 10 a.m. I'm still asleep. I'm generally awake till about 3 o'clock in the morning. So call me night times, not mornings.
Edge Radio Australia, the greater wealth.